everyone, welcome to Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world who wish to pursue their career in art. I'm your host Niharika, and on this show you will hear artists talk about their lives and the choices they had to make in pursuit of arts. We will also get to use some tips and key learnings from the lives of these artists, along with a detailed discussion on their areas of interest. So quickly hop onto a journey into the world of arts along with us. Now today here we have with us Miss Olivia Carter. Miss Olivia Carter is a veteran dance educator with experience in all teaching settings, higher education, K-12 schools, and private studios. Olivia served as the Director of Dance Education at Hofstra University for 2 years, which was recognized on a national level as one of the top 30 dance programs in the United States. She's also created 2 dance programs in the New Jersey public and private schools, and she has also taught in many dance studios across the country. Olivia has presented on dance education at national and regional conferences in the United States. She has also been published in Dance Studio Life magazine and on danceteacher.com. Lastly, she's the founder and CEO of Dance Ed Tips, a company dedicated to helping dance teachers refine their practice. Dance Ed Tips has supported over 2,000 dance teachers across the world with their resources, webinars, and online courses. They have been featured in the Dance Teacher magazine in the July-August 2020 issue, News 12 NJ, the Star Ledger, NJ.com, No Box Dance Podcast, and the Business of Dance Podcast. Now she's also on Movement and Me. So hi, Olivia. Thank you for joining us here. And thank you for agreeing to do this with us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yes, likewise. And I think our introductory conversation before we started the recording is even more interesting. And I have a couple more questions that I probably will pop up as we go.
That's great.
So before we get started on anything else, I think the first and the most pertinent question is, how did you get started with dance and what is your journey like? What was your inspiration behind getting into movement and why do you think you decided to go for it anyway?
So I come from a family of dancers, a family of movers. My mom was a dancer and a dance teacher my whole life. She was my dance teacher growing up. And my grandma on my dad's side was also a dancer, and she opened a yoga studio the year I was born. So literally since my birth, I have been in a movement family, and I've been so lucky to be able to watch them teach almost every day. If I wasn't going to the studio with my mom to watch her teach and take classes myself, I was going to my grandma's yoga studio, watching her teach, helping her run the business, saying hi to people at the door, collecting the checks. You know, they put me in that atmosphere since I can remember. So I've been basically dancing my whole life. And I decided to eventually go to school for dance. I was unsure first, but when I was about 16, I made the decision, okay, this is my passion. This is what I want to do. And then I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey for dance performance, and I got my BFA. And when I was there, they started a new program that was new at the school, and it was a master's degree in dance education. So I became a certified dance teacher in the state of New Jersey, and I began teaching in studios, which I'd been doing for a while, in public schools and private schools. And then I've also been teaching in higher education, teaching other people how to become dance teachers.
Wow, I think you just sort of narrowed everything down to that short window. But I'm curious. So I have a curious question, and I think it just sort of, makes me want to ask it. People talk about the idea of business in dance to be something which is very uncomfortable or something that is unheard of. Also, because dance is always regarded as this high art, which cannot be looked at in a from a business perspective. So how did it feel to be on the ground dealing and looking after a business that had movement and yoga in it? And what was the experience like?
It's one of those things when it's your upbringing, you don't realize it's unique until you look back and reflect on it. You know what I mean? And it's something that you kind of take for granted growing up because you're just like, oh, this is normal. And then you talk to other people and you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually not normal. But what my grandparents did for me as models, they really, my grandma's yoga philosophy, because she kind of developed her own technique over many, many years of teaching yoga, but her philosophy of yoga carried through in how they ran the business. You know, she would clean the whole place by herself because she always believed that you have to respect your body and you need a clean space to move in. The way that they did they would always do 8-week sessions because they believed that people needed to have 8 weeks of time to investigate the movement practice in order to decide whether it really worked for them or not. And people always said it's going to work, and they always kept coming back. So they really modeled for me the fact that your teaching philosophy can it be embedded in how you actually run your business. And so I think when people do that, you run your business, your movement business, from a really authentic place, and it resonates with people. My grandmother was teaching yoga by herself. Like, she taught most of the classes. She was teaching like 600, 700 people a week, just her in her studio. So I think that was a really huge influence on me and how I run my own dance business now and how I interact and really try to, lead with my teacher brain and let that inform the business decisions that we make as a team.
That's actually quite interesting because you point out the fact that you can take your teaching skills and put them to use in the business, and also sort of curate a space that is most conducive for running a business as well as for being able to teach whatever it is that you wish to teach. Excuse me for that. But I think that's interesting because nobody talks about it in that way, and nobody actually looks at business being one of those possible ways of teaching, or a space where you could engage in teaching as much as you're engaging in, say, earning an income.
Right.
Uh, so thank you for putting it out there for all of us. And I think it's something that is really important to look at and think about and always remember. Bringing on, taking that and also adding another layer to it, I want to know what your experience has been. You have been an educator for more than 15 years now. You've been teaching, you've been performing, and you've been participating in the whole dance space for more than 15 years. Tell me what if you think, or what you think about what was there before and what is there today, and how have things evolved? And do you think things have evolved?
I think things have definitely evolved since I first started teaching. And I think especially in the past, year or two, there's been even more changes happening. Um, some of the biggest changes I see, particularly in my college students and in my community, is we're starting to really bring important issues about race, about gender, about equity, about inclusion, and we're finally bringing that to the forefront. There's been a lot of people who have been doing that for a long time. So doing this through dance and in dance is not anything new, but it's becoming more commonplace for everyone to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations and beginning to take, a critical look at ourselves and say, how can we do better? How can we serve our community better? How can we serve our students better? How can we serve dance better? And so I'm really excited that our students are growing up in a time in dance where we're actively doing and talking about those things, right? Because if they're hearing those things in their formative years, imagine the conversations they'll be willing to have on these hard topics when they're older, right? So it's just this continuation of all the work that so many people have been doing, and now it's kind of coming to the forefront, and we're kind of building upon generations of work.
You say something very interesting, and I want to ask you this question. How
Sure.
important do you think it is for dancers, dance educators, practitioners, performers, everybody who is in the field of dance, or even movement for that matter, I'll expand it to movement, to talk about issues of race, gender, equity, inclusion? Because Even today, say for example, if I pick up India, there are sects, there are silos that are there that exist, which are talking about these issues, maybe not race as much as the other ones, but there's definitely the idea of, what color would best suit a dancer. And there are issues, for example, wherein a dancer is expected to put on thick layers of makeup if she's a little dark skinned, just to hide the fact that she's dark skinned. So you would actually see her arms looking darker in shade versus her face, which is like literally bright and in your face. And a lot of dancers have complained that they actually lose self-esteem while
Mhm.
being in the process. So how important do you think it is to talk about these things? Because on one hand, we see that there's a section in the society that is already progressing and talking about it. There's a section, on the other hand, which does not seem to either be wanting to do it or does not seem to be aware of these things. So if you could just
Right.
throw us a little, throw a little light on why it's important, and maybe we can just talk about how it can be done.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a big issue. It's a big conversation to have. There's always work that can be done. The main thing I try to remind myself when I'm in the classroom is that, yes, these people that are in front of me are dancers, but they're humans first. And so we need to feed their soul as humans so that they can excel in dance and take everything they learn in dance and become whatever they want to be, and use those skills in whatever way they want to. And, I've had the privilege, like the incredible honor of teaching tons of different types of students, different ages, from different backgrounds, that speak different languages. And what I've always noticed is that when the students see themselves in what you're teaching, they light up. I don't know how else to explain it, but when they see that they belong in what you're delivering for them, it's life changing. You know what I mean? So for instance, for my male students, I'm a female. I identify as a woman and female. And so I see it for my boys when I bring in a male guest artist, someone who identifies as male. It changes, you know what I mean? And they just see themselves in that person. They see themselves in the content. And that's just something I need to be really conscious of and keep actively doing. And that goes across everything, about the body types that I show, about people of different races that I show, different cultural identities that I show in class. Everything, I need to really make sure that all my students see themselves, because if they see themselves and they feel represented, then they can begin to dive deeper into the material, they can make important connections, and then the work can really begin. So I think it's really important for us to, be honest with ourselves. For change to happen, you have to look within yourself and just be honest. It happens to me all the time. I'm definitely not perfect. I go, why did I say that? Or why did I do this? Or why did I pick that video? And the more you ask why and just, you know, are curious about your decisions, the more you can make better choices, more informed choices, and ultimately your students will benefit from it, and they deserve the best. They're your students. They deserve to have the best experience they can in dance.
You point something very interesting out. So you talk about materials, you talk about experiences, you talk about the idea of being able to look at themselves in the way that they have seen somebody else. So idealization, finding a mentor, finding someone that they can look up to and relate to, so that the process gets a little easier. You're not the first person to step into this field, do this, and hence there are people who have already done it before, and you're probably only just joining the group. I
Mhm.
think that makes it a little more easier, because then
Yep.
it's not something that you're stepping out of your comfort zones, or you're completely going against the nature, or whatever it is that you have to call it, the societal expected way of moving or functioning, to do whatever it is that you wish to do. And I think that's very important, because you see that there's a physicalization, sorry, like a physical appearance, or like a manifestation of what it is that you wish to be in front of you, and you can just attach yourself to it, and imagine yourself in the shoes of that person, and see if you can even try and be that person someday. So thank you so much for pointing those things out, and really looking at it from this perspective, because while we do the readings, while we do teach the dance, while we do teach movement, we have conversations. We don't really necessarily talk about bringing in other people who they can sort of, learn from or get mentored from, and also maybe even idolize for a certain to a certain extent. um, and I think that's also important. And now that you talk about it, my brain's actually working in the background thinking, oh, that's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
very interesting, because it puts like two and two together and makes it easy. It's like a bridge in between that combines what is already being put in theory, what is being discussed in class, to what can be done in practicality.
absolutely.
So thank you so much for pointing it out there for all of us and for all dance educators. Whoever's listening, please, you are more than welcome to, get in touch with all of us. Type in the chat box on YouTube, or just click on send us messages on Spotify or anywhere else that you can find. I've also attached my email ID, or mentioned my email ID on the YouTube channel, so you're more than welcome to email them to me. If the questions are from Olivia, I will forward them to her, and whenever she gets the time, she will definitely respond back to us. But that's how we build a community. So I hope you reach out and ask for any help if you have any questions or doubts. On that note, I have a question that I want to ask you, Olivia. And this is something that also happens to bother a lot of people. And it's
Okay.
something that I personally have struggled with, is what I would say. So you have been a dance educator. Sorry, you have been the director of dance education at Hofstra University for almost more than 2 years. And I want to know, why did you decide to start a social media page, or how I mean, the question more or less is, how important do you think social media presence is in today's world, for an artist, for a dance educator, for a dancer, for a practitioner, whoever it is in the dance field? And why do you think you decided to go and, create a social media presence for Hofstra University on social media? I mean, what was the purpose behind it?
Yeah, I mean, social media it's kind of your business card now. It's it even, I dare say, I know this might feel controversial for people, but even more than a website, I think. um and it's kind of hard sometimes, because you kind of have to think of like how you're going to brand yourself. You have to kind of think of that word, but that's kind of what's starting to happen. It's really your outward facing presence with people in your community. And so I think for all dancers, choreographers, educators, it's great to have, if that interests you, to be able to share that part of yourself. And can help you connect with people who believe in the same things, kind of like we found each other, right? And it kind of makes you feel like you can find the individuals that are kind of pursuing the same interests. In terms of Hofstra, they actually had a social media presence before I was there. But what was kind of happening, what I was noticing, is that the way that the students were using it, it was really geared towards students that were at Hofstra at that time. So they were posting things like, hey, we have a meeting tomorrow, or we have auditions coming up. And so the purpose of their social media platform that they had was really geared for people who were already there. And they were doing a great job at that. It felt very like a community. But when you were an outsider looking at the social media, prospective students couldn't really, they didn't really get a feel, is this place for me? And so that's really the shift that I kind of nudged my students in when I was at Hofstra, was how can we make this social media platform also really interesting and exciting for people who want to be prospective students, and for people who want to decide to come to Hofstra and do dance education or do dance. So I think for anybody who's building a social media platform, you really need to think about, who are you talking to? Who is your audience, right? So it's not just maybe in terms of Hofstra's case, it's not just the people who are already there. We also want to talk to people that we want to come. So that's definitely kind of a tip I have for anyone who's looking to do that. Think of your audience.
I think it's very important, of course. Like I personally have struggled. I was like, I'll just put things up because I want to put things up. And then when I started putting things up, I realized that it's probably not something that people would want to read or go through, because it's not relatable, or it's something that only makes sense to me in my head, because in that moment, this is the most relatable content I could find, or this is what I stumbled upon.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right to talk about who you're speaking to and who it is that you want to have a conversation with. And it becomes utterly important to have that distinction in your head and have that understanding in your head before you put anything on social media. Um, but I want to ask you another question about social media, because you just pointed it out that it's probably something which is a little bit more important than, say, your regular website, like your website that you own. So how important and why do you think that social media is gaining so much of popularity? And is there something that we need to, as a collective community, keep in mind when we talk to each other? Are there certain things that we need to really have conversation about? Is there a way? Because I notice today that people just blindly send messages or type things in the comment section without really thinking of the consequences that their comments may have. And then we're living in a very volatile community. So is there something that you would like to tell the people who are really engaging with social media to be mindful about?
Yes, it's hard. I have to admit, we've been very lucky, on the Dance Ed Tips page. Everyone has been super positive, constructive, helpful. It's been a really positive experience. So I have to say, like, our community is awesome, and we've it's been nothing but positive. But I do see sometimes, and it depends also on the platform. Like sometimes in like Facebook groups, I see that that's where it can get really heated. And something that I try to think about when I'm, looking at other people's pages is I'm trying to always think to myself, if they're a dance educator and they're a dancer, they automatically have something that I value and can connect with. And so I want to assume the best. I want to assume that, they're always thinking about their students. I want to assume that there's a rationale behind how they're doing something, behind why they're doing something. Like I always try to tell myself, the teacher knows their students the best. They're the ones that are with them all the time, daily or weekly. And so I always try to remind myself that most likely whatever this teacher is doing or this person is doing, they're probably doing what they think is best for their students. And so when I put that part of my brain on and lead the conversation with that, I think we can always find common ground and say, we all care about dance. We all care about students growing through dance. And let's start the conversation that way. And we can disagree. It's not about us agreeing on everything. But if we start the conversation with that tone, I think only good can come from it. So that's kind of my personal mindset. I don't know if it will help others, maybe, but that's kind of what I do.
No, I think that's something very interesting you pointed out. I think we somehow tend to forget and we assume that everybody who's posting anything up, or even just posting their opinion, somehow has to be um, uh, like held accountable for their thoughts. And sometimes I think we also tend to think that they have to prove what they are saying to be right. And I think we are just struggling and fighting within ourselves to sort of pick or stay in the binary of right and wrong. That if I have an opinion and I have a thought, that I am right, and whoever does not agree with that opinion is in the wrong. And I think you pointed something very interesting out, where you say that we should always give the benefit of the doubt to the other person. They come from an understanding of what they believe to be is the right way of maybe teaching or educating, or even practicing or performing. And I think it's just important to understand that they may not have the tools or the necessary information to assess a situation the way that you or I do, based on the kind of tools that we have today. And this is something which I would like to talk about a little bit as well, because it's very pertinent in our classical spaces today. And we are struggling. We're of course now in the space where we are figuring this out for ourselves. But we've had this situation where it is the body is assumed to take care of itself, and that you don't necessarily need to do anything, and hence warm up and cool downs were not really a part of your practice sessions. But over time, there have been incidents and cases where performing and practicing on a cemented floor has resulted in a lot of dancers having to go through knee injuries, knee replacement injuries, or hip replacement injuries because their bodies could not take their knees, or their joints could not absorb the shock that would, come from the floors. It's something that people evolved and learned over time. And it's also because people started recognizing that, what, it's not natural for a dancer to have a knee replacement or a hip replacement surgery. You're doing something wrong, and probably that's what's leading to it. And it's okay for you to not know because you were never taught that. But the
Mhm.
fact that you're curious enough to find out is what makes this whole process exciting and very, very necessary. If you
Yep.
start asking the questions, why are so many dancers going through a knee replacement surgery or a hip replacement surgery? And I think that's where you start transitioning from someone who's just following the agenda or the age old way of teaching to something that goes beyond that and trying to add and inculcate tools that will help. And I think you, with your experience and with your expertise that you've been doing, everything that you've been doing, have been trying to put up and create a space where you can provide such tools to people and help them out in all of that. On that note, I'm gonna very quickly end the first part of this discussion and interview. Thank you all for tuning into Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world. To continue receiving notifications on our latest episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel Natya Mandalam or look us up on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for more information. I'm your host Niharika, and I'll see you all next time.